So as we begin the discussion on centralized versus decentralized, I want to make sure that we revolve around our AI, right? Return on AI, which is what most people are here for. And highlighting something Babak Hojat brought up yesterday. He was talking about how getting AI to be successful in your company, it's about asking the right question. And then once you have a solution out of AI from that question, then use it to positively impact the business. So I just want to make sure that that's the backdrop of the conversation. I'd like to start with you three giving a 1-minute intro of yourselves.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Al Brown. I'm the SVP of Veritone. I'm responsible for engineering, data science, and architecture. I've been involved in AI for a pretty long time. In undergrad, I was building neural nets. I've been pretty much involved in big data systems through analytics all the way up to now. And Veritone builds an AI operating system.
Mike Haley, I head up AI and robotics at Autodesk, primarily focused at the research on those, but also focusing at bringing AI to the company. So part of my group does active research in many areas of AI, including dealing with geometry, dealing with simulation, control systems in robotics, knowledge representations for building things in the world. So it's exciting stuff, great data sets we get to work with. But it's also a large company. We're an 11,000 person company that is a lot of engineers used to building traditional software. So pivoting that towards AI is something we'll be talking about.
Yeah. So I'm Alberto Lopez. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Freshly. I've been involved in AI for probably 15 years. If you count the PhD, probably a bit more. Freshly, for those that you know, is a meal service company that delivers fresh food, very healthy food to our consumers. And we use AI for absolutely every aspect of the company. I'm responsible for the software engineering for IT and the data teams. And we use AI from recommendation systems, doing personalization of the meals, logistics, manufacturing processes as we build new facilities. And it has proven very, very useful. I mean, people are really surprised sometimes that even for consumer companies, AI is critical, but we embedded in the culture of the company from the very beginning. And continuous improvement is actually critical. Using AI for small improvements is compound interest, and that is very embedded in the culture of everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So just a quick definition, what we were talking about, right? Centralized versus decentralized. Simple idea of, do you construct a team that then serves all the other teams in the organization, or do you have every team in the organization have their own resources? Andrew Moore alluded to this idea of matching the question with the solution yesterday, and I kind of see the analogy as, do you get the people that have the question and move them to the solution, or do you try to move the solution to everyone that has the question? And I think that's how you see the two. And before we go into what side of the equation you're on here, I would love to know what you think the hurdles are for both sides.
Absolutely. So when I look at centralized organizations where you centralize data science, where I see the hurdles are is they get distracted or they get further away from the actual business. They don't understand all the nuances. However, they get to build better best practices, and you can learn vicariously across each other. So there's strengths and weaknesses there. Mm-hmm. When you look at decentralized, so basically embedding data scientists across the team, you can't really share knowledge as easy, data or tools and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think another aspect that plays into this is the speed of technology evolution in AI. So I mean, we're dealing with a space here where the cutting edge of this field is moving forward every single day. So it's not a matter of just going and learning something once, giving it to your engineering teams, and then they're done. You've got to be kind of in that loop. So if you take the decentralized route, that's a little tricky because you've got to make sure that everybody in your company is constantly keeping pace with what's going on, whereas it's an easier thing in a centralized group. Conversely, if you're in a centralized group, as you were saying, the way you actually scale and operate within the company becomes very difficult. You have to start dealing with prioritization issues. You have to start dealing with becoming a bottleneck. How do you actually budget for that in your company? It starts creating a lot of sort of higher level issues that are more systemic issues within your company. So, two things.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that at least we focus a lot in the company's culture, and centralized and decentralized have different aspects of the culture. If you have a centralized team, it kind of gets detached from the actual problems, and they are usually seen as, oh, these are the data people that are there, and they don't know my problems, and they're the bottlenecks because I asked them to do some things, and they take some time to resolve it, and okay, I'm going to do it on my own, right? So you kind of get detached, and you don't have this, this culture of everyone should be a data scientist in your company, in a sense. I mean, they maybe don't have the foundation, but you need someone to be with them all the time, remind them that the data is absolutely critical. If you go to the decentralized, I think that the biggest problem is that you don't have this cohesive, like, peer help between the data people that are, the synergies that you find. There's a lot of repetition, a lot of redundancy and inefficiencies. But I would say that not having a central point in which you keep the single source of truth or the ground truth, especially protecting the data models and the data dictionary, if you distribute everything, it's going to be very, very difficult, and people will start talking to each other in a different language. So that would be the centralized problem from my point of view.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the way I heard it was when you're doing a centralized, there's the problem of, like you were mentioning, every one of you kind of touched on the same point in a different way, which is the people with the solution are not as embedded with the people with the question, and then they're not as involved, they don't know the nuance of the problems, which is a problem of communication.
Correct.
Right? And when you do decentralized, then the data scientists in the different teams don't have a cohesive approach, or there's not consistency, which is also a problem of communication, because the data scientists are not as So it seems like in both equations that you're trying to solve a problem of communication, right? It's just intra versus inter communication.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, it's again that merging of question to solution, and how do you bring the two together the best. I'd love to hear how you've approached the problem, given that there's clearly difficulties in both sides, and how you're navigating this, and what you think is the approach, at least the one that you take for yourself, not necessarily the one you'd recommend, but the one that works for the company you're in.
Perfect. So first of all, Veritone's an AI-first company. Everything we do is AI. We actually have a sales engineer that took our platform, wired up his Ring doorbell to actually unlock his front door with his face. So everything we do is somehow involved with AI. What I've done is really a hybrid approach. So I actually have two centralized teams focusing on core capabilities that everybody can use. So that's kind of doing face recognition, logo detection, things like that. I then have a couple of teams that are focused on very specific problems that actually have very rich data science needs. And so we've embedded data scientists onto those teams. So I've actually done both.
So I thought I was going to be the only one that said I did both. Yeah, it sounds very political, doesn't it? Yeah, so what we've done is we've created a centralized, what we call our AI labs. So the labs are a place where we are doing active research. We connected with academics. I mean, the researchers focus obviously at our problems, so it's not just blue sky kind of research. But part of the AI Lab's mission is also to transport our knowledge into the company. And the way we do that is the AI Labs themselves are physical spaces that are open for other engineers in the company to come and sit and work in those spaces. So if the AutoCAD team in Autodesk decides to do a new machine learning feature and they don't have the skills, they can take a couple of architects and engineers, come and park them in the lab for 6 months while they work on their first feature, work with the researchers. The researchers get to learn from the engineers. Oh, that's the kind of stuff you guys need to solve. And obviously the engineers get to learn skills from the researchers. By the time they transition back into the team, it then becomes a more decentralized model at that time, because they've now carried that knowledge and those skills, and even some of the tool sets and stuff that have been developed in the lab. So we're not trying to build perfect production level code traditionally in the labs. We're trying to get things past that sort of first mark. Once they transition back into the engineering teams, then go for it, scale out the engineering. So a little bit sort of similar.
So we followed a hybrid approach, and one of the issues of Freshly is, the company is probably like 4 years, a little bit more of 4 years old, and we have already 1,400 employees. So it has been growing at such a speed, and the teams always had this huge need of AI and data science. So if you don't go really quick and growing at the same pace of the company, you end up with the departments going completely decentralized. So what what I found it worked really well is having a central team that is data engineering, mostly, that is sitting on top of the data models and everything that is like a foundational framework that is supporting everything else. And we have what we call the business solutions, where you need to do a tool or something that is to automate the problems of some of the departments have using some of the synergies, because many departments have for almost the same thing, but slightly different, but you can actually automate some of these things. Those are a centralized team and the data team. But then what we have is the business analysts, which report to the data team, but they sit 100% of the time on the different departments. And these are people that are hired by the data department. They're trained by the department. We share, our stands, our rituals every day between their peers, understanding what the problems are. But they actually sit physically. We have one for marketing, obviously one for the CEO, because the CEO is always asking for things. And they sit there, and they become part of. They're more like squads or pods in the agile sense, and they become part of that team, and they understand their problems. And they're the first line of defense, that they solve most of the problems that can be usually self-service tools. But they come back to the data team to say, these issues that we have, and they help building the roadmap, but they're advocates for these departments. So that's the way that we solve it's kind of a hybrid in the centralized and decentralized.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of disagreement here, right, between the three of you. I'm going to have to introduce some conflict, because I'm not moderating any conflict here. I have to
solve the problem already.
So here's the conflict. Do you take the hybrid approach because you think these two methods are so great, I would love to do both of them, or they both kind of suck, and you kind of have to do both of them in order to make up for the downfall of each of the two? Meaning, in a perfect world, if there were better solutions, if technology had no limitations, you could say, you know what, AI needs to come to this level or that level, or be able to achieve this. Is there a better solution that just not possible today, but that you see in the future with the help of technology, perhaps?
Yeah, so that's a great question. To actually be an AI-driven company, you first have to be a data-driven company, which means you have to understand your data. The reason why I have a hybrid approach is I really have people that are more of the AI tool builders that actually build the tools that the rest of the company uses. Mm-hmm. Then there is this data infrastructure, which is really why we have AIware, which is this operating system for AI, that we can plug the tools into, plug the data into, and then can be leveraged across all the different teams. And that is why we're doing the hybrid approach, because the people that actually I want to leverage the tools, the AI tools that we have, are actually the ones in the field that are solving our customers' problems every day, right? And that's the use of them. I need to be decentralized. However, creating them, I don't necessarily need to be decentralized all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a tension between specialty and scale. I would say that's the essence of the tension between those. And you're going to need specialties. Specialties where knowledge comes from, where you learn how to do something. Scale is what we have to do to make our businesses work, right? So, decentralization naturally does scale well, obviously. I'll give you a story. So Autodesk, is traditionally a desktop software company from many years ago, and we transitioned to the cloud over the last 15 years, and my team was a large part of that. In the beginning, we were naturally a decentralized company. So we all went off and did cloud stuff, got your Amazon account, swiped your card and built stuff, and you can imagine what happened, because there would be team A over there that thought they knew what they were doing, and team B thought they knew what they were doing, except team B had only been doing it for 6 months, and team A had been doing it for 10 years. So guess which solution was better? Except there was no way of rationalizing that because they were totally decentralized. So what you end up is this stack that has got great bits here and not so great bits over there, right? And we learn from that. And we're like, well, no, hang on. What we've got to do is allow decentralization, but have some sort of commonality, a little bit like what you're saying about building your tools. You don't want a tool set that has got bits that are just terrible and bits that are great because they were built by different teams. You want consistency in that layer, But then you want the distribution that comes from scale. So it's really the specialty versus scale tension. And I don't think either model suck. I just think that they have a purpose, And the secret is to how you get the two to mingle together and to cooperate. And it probably shifts over time, the balance between the two, but part of it.
And it also probably shifts depending on the company, right?
And
the
culture.
culture, which is, I think,
100%.
I mean, I always say this thing that, AI and data, we have the technology to solve these problems, but many times the culture gets in the way. And you have to have a top-down approach to understanding, we're a data-driven company, we instrument everything, we collect all the data, but also you need to establish the company culture and framework in a way that you can act upon that data. Because if you don't have that, you have a lot of companies that collect all this data and they say they do AI, but once you get the solution, you show it to the company, but there's nothing that you can do because there's too much either friction or there's too much establishment. And so I would say that probably centralized is what it would make sense in terms of efficiency and shared knowledge and everything.
Yeah.
But this cultural part, I think you need these advocates, you need these people that are AI-driven, data embedded in the teams. So they see the AI team as a help and as someone that is solving your problems. Because many times everyone says that they are very data driven, but the reality is that if you need to have certain things in place, and sometimes it's surprising, but I say this all the time. One of the key things of having a data team is using the scientific method. It has been around for 500 years and it works. And surprisingly, there is a lot of people that don't use scientific methods. So you need some people to be educating the different departments and seeing this as a huge advancement. So I think that the hybrid way is probably the one at least that, as you can see, we all found that probably is the most useful. But I would say that if we had technology that would be able to solve or at least to educate the different departments that are not, data scientists, self-service tools that will help them to understand all these things, you could get far, but the culture part will not be solved. So I think that you would still need to have advocates. You still need to have these peers that are sitting with, with the marketing team or the manufacturing team and helping them understand what are the kind of things that we can do for them.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, it's a maturity cycle thing, right? So I mean, if you're a company that really has never done AI before, and you're only beginning it now, having a small team that really does some work in the beginning, that shows the way, that starts to build the culture, just really helps the company identify with how it should be going about it. That's a great way to start. You're not just going to flick the switch and go decentralize straight away. If your company's not set up and doesn't have the culture,
And to your point, also it depends on what is the maturity of the company or how old the company is before they introduce AI.
Yeah.
So if it's a very established company that has all these ways, and suddenly you're gonna throw a lot of money into a center of excellence, if the company is 100 years old and suddenly all these people come in and they say that they're data scientists, that is not going to work.
It's also not going to work.
It's not going to work. They're going to fail. They don't have the trust of the other departments. So that you absolutely need some kind of hybrid approach. So to embed all these people in different departments. While if you start a company that is maybe a pure AI company from the very beginning, in which you hire the people already with this mindset and already with this education, you probably can go decentralized a long way.
But you still have to build the infrastructure to actually have all the data, have it accessible, so that you can start leveraging it.
Single source of truth. I mean, that is like data dictionary. I mean, people don't forget about this thing. It's the most important part.
A lot of work to do, yeah.
Sorry, so it seems like the way you're going is you seem to all agree that having the solution brought to the person asking the question, right? Meaning the person at the different groups, right? The person in sales or marketing, having them empowered to answer their questions is a good idea. And then where the centralization comes in place is they're there for support. And you mentioned they're there for maybe building tools to allow the decentralized people to be supportive. Or you mentioned maybe it's not the tools they're building, but the culture or the support and teaching, et cetera. So the message is ideally the person asking the question should be able to answer, but then you need some kind of support, and that's where the centralization comes. And the two questions there. One is, that is easier said than done for some companies, but when you're looking at companies that are not in the Bay Area and they don't have an exciting product, they produce doorknobs, old school doorknobs, and they can't attract people to make a centralized, they're not going to attract 20 PhDs to make a centralized, AI team. So there's that issue there, right, of can you even attract that talent? And then the other one is, can tools then help companies like that to play the role of this centralized team with tools, whether they existed there or not, but is that a path?
That is actually a complete path, and you need to make a distinction between creating the tools and then leveraging the tools. And so even for the doorknob company, they first have to get the data, and then they have to have the data to answer the questions of what are they really trying to solve with that data. At that point, there's lots of algorithms out there, and most people really aren't defining new algorithms. What they're really doing is feature generation that feeds into the models, or feeds into the algorithms to actually create the models, which you don't need as much PhDs to actually go do that, to leverage those. And so there are solutions out there that will help.
Yeah. I think you need to get specific about what a company is going to do. So if you're a doorknob company, I would highly advise you against going and hiring a whole bunch of AI PhDs. You can go to Element.ai, you can go to Vector Institute, you can go to a bunch of these people and say, hey, we've got a great problem here. Do you want to work with us on this? Again, like you were talking about all the culture stuff. It's not just technology, it's culture. If your environment is not set up for that, how fast do you want to move? Do you want to spend the next 15 years trying to build an AI capacity in your company, or do you want to get something done in a couple of years, and have a set of tools like you said?
Yeah, I think this is, I agree completely. It's very important to understand what do you want the AI for, and you need to understand what is the strategy of the company, how it's going to be leveraged, and what is the return on AI, which I love that you mentioned that, because sometimes we forget about this, like just throwing 20 PhDs at the problem. It's not going to, they're going to be desperate and not being able to solve any problem. I will, for the example that you're putting into the doorknob company, I will probably advise them to get someone that is very doesn't have to be a PhD, but is someone that has been managing data for a little bit, and then contract some companies or contract some universities. Even if, as we were growing when we were establishing the data team, we actually did use a lot of this, even local universities, to work with the departments. Like, I have this problem, I have this data, help me clean it, or at least tell me what is wrong. And they come back and tell you what's wrong. And then you can actually, so you can ease yourself into this problem without having just to spend too much effort or maybe money that is not going to be successful.
Exactly.
I wanted to give a chance for people in the audience to ask some questions. I think we're hitting the 5-minute mark. Do we have any questions in the audience right now for the panelists? All right.
Someone has to.
No questions? I think everybody has the ansers.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
The three of us are agreeing. So.
There's true.
There's nothing to discuss.
Do you think, talking to a large company, it was a Fortune 100 company, they were halfway into building their center of excellence for AI. At the time, they had about 200 data scientists in that team. They were going to build up to 300. The company was massive, probably at least 100,000 employees total. The interesting thing, and I was talking to the head of the Center of Excellence, and he said, I've built centers of excellence before, and I believe the best plan for a center of excellence is when you already start with the goal of dissolving the center of excellence, right? So if you build a center of excellence thinking the center of excellence is going to be there forever, that's not right. He comes in, he says, I want to build it and dissolve it within 3, 4, maximum 5 years, which means by dissolving it, I achieved the goal of I've disseminated that throughout the company well enough so that, so he did a hybrid approach, but it was more of a transitional approach. It was start heavy on the centralized and then spread and eventually transition to a completely decentralized. I wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
Actually, I think that's completely accurate. And one of the examples I use is back in the early 1900s, we actually used to have departments of power. Which company has a department of power nowadays? Right? So as you look at the maturity model of the actual technology itself, when you don't understand it, you build center of excellences. And then as you start understanding it, you know how to use it, know how to apply it. You have all the trainings to actually use it. You start pushing it into all parts of your business. At that point, you don't need it.
Yeah, the only tweak I agree with that in essence. If you do what we're doing, where we've made it the center of excellence part of research, it's a little different. So I would see it rather as the evolution of research. So any research group that keeps itself static for 10 years is going to fail, obviously, because the industry's moving. So today we have an AI group. 5 years from now, it might be the quantum computing group. Who knows? You know, we might be doing something different. And we'll hopefully be predicting those changes and adjusting to them as we go. So that's the only, but I think in essence, it's the same thing, because we're moving on to the next thing. You know?
I mean, I usually are against calling something a center of excellence, because that basically is like telling everyone else that they're not excellent, which is it's tricky. I agree that you would create a center of excellence to do research and solve a problem that you don't know, and you need to spend some resources trying to figure it out. But that's not what I see as an AI team. The AI team that's doing the infrastructure, that's doing the tools and automation for the rest of the company, it always has to exist. I don't see that completely being decentralized, because you still need, even if it's small, you still need to have the synergies there. So the center of excellence is just to maybe spend some years figuring out what's going to be the model, and then this team will actually create the model. That's fine. But I don't see the complete decentralized model.
I'd question whether that's an AI team, though, really, at the end of the day. Right?
I think it goes back in IT, going back in the IT department as a data team or something like that.
Probably a data team, yeah, that's correct.
Because you really are building infrastructure.
That's correct.
At that point.
Everybody then uses.
The question is when, at some point, AI will be like IT. I mean, it's a commodity. It will be tools and models and stuff like that. That is going to be like, this is the, bread and butter for almost all the companies, even the doorknob company. So.
Exactly.
And the research I get, and that's not going to apply for every company, right? Not every company needs to be on the bleeding edge. They just need to apply it. And it's back to the analogy of the current data scientist is like the jet engine engineer, but we're making them fly the planes. And that's not a great use of their time, but that's because flying these planes are still not easy enough. But if eventually, and ideally, you want them designing the new jet engines, not spending their time just flying the planes, and you let other people fly the planes, and you keep them as research, which is, hey, we need new jet engines.
You want to leverage them for what they know best. Right? You know, there's also a little difference between thinking of sort of more traditional data science problems and actually machine learning like features in products. You know, where I mean, if you're trying to figure out, you know, how to come up with some insight, say, in some data, that's a certain kind of problem. Like you were using the word question in the beginning, like what questions somebody might have. But if you're trying to build a machine learning feature and you don't even know how to build that feature, how it's going to interact, you're going to need a whole different set of skills much earlier on in the cycle as well. So people can get deployed differently depending on exactly how you're using machine learning. I mean, obviously, there's not just one definition of how machine learning is getting leveraged. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. So.
Yeah. I think we're just about wrapped up in time. If there's a last question or a question, otherwise, I think this is it. All right. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.